Ambassador Kim Tae-ho straightened his tie one more time before walking into the massive council chambers. The circular room stretched high above them, with seats arranged in rings like an ancient theater. 47 different alien species sat in their designated spots, each group looking down at the center where today's speakers would stand. Kim walked with calm, measured steps. Behind him, Dr. Park So-jin carried her datapad with steady hands, while Captain Lee Dong-woo kept his military bearing but tried to look friendly. They were the human delegation, and everyone in the room knew they were the newest members of the Galactic Council. The humans had joined only 15 years ago. In council time, that made them babies. Most of the other species had been here for hundreds of years. Some, like the ancient Quindle, had helped build the council thousands of years ago. Kim found their assigned seats in the outermost ring. The newest members always sat the furthest from the center. It was tradition, they were told. The humans sat down quietly and waited. High Arbiter Quindle stood at the center podium. His tall, thin frame moved with the grace of someone who had done this countless times. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's speakers. Today we discuss the frontier expansion protocols, Quindle announced. The question before us is simple. Who has the right to claim uninhabited star systems? Kim leaned forward slightly. This was important. Humanity needed new worlds for their growing population. Earth was getting crowded, and their existing colonies needed resources. Counselor Vextar was the first to speak. He represented the hegemony, one of the most powerful groups in the council. Vextar was built like a walking tank, with thick gray skin and small, sharp eyes that missed nothing. The hegemony has always been clear on this matter, Vextar said, his voice booming across the chamber. Expansion rights should go to species with proven ability to manage interstellar territories. Newer species lack the experience and wisdom needed for such responsibility. Several other counselors nodded in agreement. Kim noticed how they looked at the human section when Vextar said newer species. The message was clear. Dr. Park made a quiet note on her data pad. She had been tracking these kinds of comments for months. The pattern was always the same. Any discussion about rights or resources somehow became about how humans were too young, too inexperienced, too something. High Arbiter Quindle gestured toward the human section. Does the human delegation wish to respond? Kim stood up smoothly. He had practiced this moment many times. Thank you, High Arbiter. The human delegation respectfully suggests that expansion rights should be based on current capability, not historical status. We have submitted detailed reports showing our successful colony management and resource development programs. A few counselors made what sounded like laughing noises. Vextar's expression showed clear amusement. 15 years of colony management, Vextar said, not bothering to hide his condescending tone. How impressive. The hegemony has been successfully managing star systems since before your species discovered fire. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Kim felt his jaw tighten slightly, but his voice remained calm and professional. With respect, Counselor Vextar, we believe current performance matters more than ancient history. Our colonies show excellent growth rates and efficient resource utilization. Current performance? Another counselor spoke up. This one looked like a giant insect with too many arms. Humans have been in space for less than 200 years. You have no idea what real challenges look like. Captain Lee shifted in his seat. Kim could feel the military officer's frustration, but Lee stayed quiet. They had agreed that Kim would handle all the talking during these sessions. The debate continued for hours. Every time Kim presented facts and figures about human capabilities, the other counselors found ways to dismiss them. Too small a sample size. Not enough time to prove stability. Insufficient historical data. Dr. Park kept making notes. She was documenting everything, not just for their reports back to Earth, but because she was starting to see patterns that bothered her. Finally, High Arbiter Quindle called for the preliminary vote on sector assignments. This would determine which species got the rights to explore and potentially claim different areas of unexplored space. The results were exactly what Kim had expected, but that didn't make them less frustrating. The hegemony got the richest, most promising sectors. Other established species got areas with known strategic value or good locations for trade routes. The humans got assigned to sectors that were far from any established trade routes. Barren. Areas with few stars and no obvious resources. The worst possible assignment. The human delegation is assigned exploration rights to sectors 7 Alpha through 12 Delta, Quindle announced. These areas offer excellent opportunities for newer species to prove their capabilities in frontier management. Kim stood again. Thank you, High Arbiter. The human delegation accepts this assignment. His voice remained perfectly polite, but Dr. Park noticed his hands were clasped tightly behind his back dot as the session ended. The various delegations began filing out. Kim, Park, and Lee gathered their materials slowly, letting most of the other groups leave first. Vextar passed by their section on his way out. He paused and looked down at the 3 humans. "Don't feel bad about the assignment," he said in a voice that was clearly meant to sound helpful, but came across as mocking. "Everyone needs to start somewhere. Maybe in a few hundred years, your species will be ready for real responsibilities." He walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing in the fee. Nearly empty chamber. Captain Lee's jaw was clenched tight. "Sir, with your permission, I would like to—" "No," Kim said quietly. "We stick to the plan. Diplomatic solutions only." Dr. Park was still staring at her datapad. "Tae-ho, look at this." She showed him the screen. She had been tracking voting, patterns, and seating arrangements. Several species that normally disagreed with each other had voted exactly the same way on every issue involving humans. Species that supposedly had territorial disputes with the hegemony had supported every single proposal that benefited Vextar's people. "They're coordinating," Park said quietly. "This isn't just casual discrimination. They're working together to keep us isolated." Kim studied the data for a long moment. Then he closed the pad and handed it back to her. "Document everything," he said. "Every vote, every comment, every pattern you can find. If they want to play games, we need to understand the rules first." The 3 humans walked out of the empty chamber together. Behind them, the lights dimmed automatically. Around them, the massive space station continued its slow rotation, carrying diplomats from 47 different worlds. Kim's expression remained calm and professional, just as it had throughout the entire session. But Dr. Park noticed that his steps were slightly more precise than usual, and Captain Lee's military bearing had become more pronounced. Not they had been polite, they had been diplomatic. They had followed every rule and protocol perfectly, and they had been treated like children asking adults for permission to play. The walk back to their quarters was quiet. Each of them was thinking about the day's events, but none of them spoke until they were safely behind closed doors. Kim finally loosened his tie and sat down heavily in his chair. "Well," he said quietly, "that was educational." 3 months had passed since the sector assignments. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho sat in the same uncomfortable chair in the council chambers, but today felt different. The weight of recent discoveries pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. Dr. Park. So Jin had spent those 3 months doing what she did best, analyzing data. What she found had changed everything. The sectors assigned to humanity weren't just barren wastelands. They were already claimed by other species. Some had been claimed decades ago. The humans had been given an impossible task as a joke. Today's Council session was about trade route regulations. Kim knew this would be another uphill battle, but now he understood the game being played against them. High Arbiter Quindle called the session to order. We gather today to discuss new regulations for galactic trade routes. These updates will ensure fair access and proper security for all member species. Kim almost smiled at the word fair. He had learned a lot about council fairness over the past months. Captain Lee Dong-woo sat straighter in his chair. He had been quiet during the last session, but Kim could see the tension in his shoulders. The military officer was having a harder time hiding his feelings than the diplomat was. Councillor Vexstar stood to address the chamber. His massive frame seemed even more imposing today, and his voice carried the confidence of someone who knew he was going to win. The hegemony has prepared a comprehensive review of current trade route usage, Vexstar began. Our analysis shows that certain newer species are attempting to access routes they are not prepared to handle safely. Dr. Park's datapad lit up with the official proposal. She read through it quickly, her expression growing more serious with each line. She passed the device to Kim. The new regulations would require species to prove historical competence in interstellar trade before accessing major routes. Species with less than 50 years of space travel experience would be restricted to local systems only. Kim felt something cold settle in his stomach. This would cut humanity off from 60% of established trade routes. Their colonies would be isolated, their economy crippled. He stood to respond, keeping his voice level and professional. The human delegation requests clarification on the term historical competence. What specific criteria will be used for evaluation? Vexstar's small eyes focused on Kim with obvious amusement. The criteria are quite simple, Ambassador. Species that have proven they can handle complex interstellar operations without causing problems for others. And how exactly have humans caused problems for others? Kim asked. Another counselor spoke up. This one looked like a tall, thin bird with too many feathers. Your exploration ships had been detected in several systems that were clearly marked as off-limits to new species. Captain Lee's hands tightened on his chair arms. Kim could practically feel the military officer's anger radiating across the space between them. Those systems were listed in our assigned exploration sectors, Kim replied calmly. We were following the Council's own assignments. Vexstar made a sound that might have been laughter. Oh yes, those assignments. How is that exploration going, by the way? Found anything interesting in those empty sectors? The question was clearly a trap, but Kim had prepared for it. Dr. Park had done her homework. Actually, yes, Kim said. We found several systems that appear to have existing territorial claims. Claims that predate our assignments by several decades. A ripple of uncomfortable movement went through the chamber. Several counselors exchanged glances. High Arbiter Quindle leaned forward. That seems unlikely, Ambassador. The Council's records are quite thorough. Dr. Park stood up beside Kim. She activated her datapad's projection system, filling the air above them with a detailed star map. These are the official territorial claims registered with the Council archives, she said, her voice clear and precise. Red markers indicate systems claimed by the hegemony between 2387 and 2401. Blue markers show systems claimed by the Talvoran Empire in 2395. Green markers represent systems claimed by the Quindle Collective in 2403. The projection showed dozens of claimed systems scattered throughout the sectors assigned to humanity. And these, Park continued, are the sectors assigned to humans for exploration in the current year of 2421. The overlap was impossible to miss. Nearly every system in the human-assigned sectors was already claimed by someone else. The chamber fell silent. Kim could hear the soft hum of the station's air recyclers. Vextar was the first to speak. Clearly, there has been some administrative error. These overlaps can be resolved through proper committee review. How long would such a review take? Kim asked. These things require careful consideration. Perhaps 2 or 3 years for a thorough analysis. Captain Lee made a sound that was almost a growl. Kim shot him a warning look. 2 or 3 years, Kim repeated. Meanwhile, human expansion remains frozen while other species continue their development. That's the price of being new to the Council, Vextar said, his tone shifting from amused to condescending. Established species have earned their rights through centuries of proven reliability. Newer species must learn patience. The bird-like counselor spoke again. Humans have shown a concerning tendency toward emotional responses to setbacks. Perhaps this situation will teach your species the value of careful planning and mature consideration. Kim felt his jaw muscle twitch. It was a small movement, barely visible, but Dr. Park noticed it. In all their months of working together, she had never seen the ambassador show any physical sign of frustration. The human delegation appreciates the Council's guidance, Kim said, his voice still perfectly controlled. We will, of course, continue to work within established procedures. But something had changed in his tone. The words were diplomatic, but they carried a different weight now. The session continued for several more hours. Every human proposal was blocked or delayed. Every human question was dismissed or redirected. The pattern was so obvious that even some of the neutral species began to look uncomfortable. When the final vote came on the trade route regulations, the result was exactly what everyone expected. 43 species voted in favor. 3 abstained. 1 voted against. The humans were now officially cut off from most of galactic commerce. As the session ended and the various delegations began to leave, Vextar stopped by the human section again. His presence loomed over the 3 humans like a shadow. Don't look so discouraged, he said, his voice carrying fake sympathy. Every species goes through growing pains. The problem with humans is that you haven't learned to accept your place. Yet, you keep thinking you deserve the same treatment as species that have earned their status. He paused, studying Kim's face. Your species reminds me of unruly children who think they should sit at the adult table. But children need supervision until they learn proper behavior. Captain Lee started to rise from his chair, but Kim's hand landed on his arm. Thank you for the guidance, Counselor, Kim said quietly. We'll certainly take your words under consideration. Vextar nodded and walked away, satisfied with his little speech. The 3 humans sat in silence until the chamber was nearly empty. Dr. Park was reviewing data on her pad again, but her expression was different now. Colder, more analytical. Teho, she said quietly. I've been monitoring their communications. Kim looked at her sharply. What kind of communications? The kind they think we can't intercept. 17 different species have been coordinating their votes for months. They're not just discriminating against us randomly. This is organized. She showed him her screen. Lists of names, meeting times, vote tallies. A complete picture of systematic exclusion. They've been planning this since before we joined the Council, Park continued. The goal isn't just to slow us down. They want to put us in our place permanently. Captain. Lee leaned over to look at the data. His expression was no longer that of a diplomatic liaison trying to be friendly. It was the face of a military officer analyzing a threat. How much more of this are we supposed to take? He asked quietly. Kim looked around the empty chamber. The lights were starting to dim automatically. As much as we need to, he said, but his voice had changed. The diplomatic warmth was gone, replaced by something harder. Dr. Park noticed that. Kim's hands were no longer clasped politely in his lap. They were resting flat on his knees, fingers spread. It was a small change, But she had been watching him carefully for months. The ambassador was getting tired of being polite. They gathered their materials and walked toward the exit. Behind them, a massive chamber fell into darkness. None of them spoke during the walk back to their quarters, but they all understood that something fundamental had shifted during today's session. The game was becoming clearer. The question was how much longer they would keep playing by the other side's rules. The emergency alarm echoed through the council chambers at 0347 station time. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho was pulled from deep sleep by the urgent message on his communication device. Emergency session. All delegations required to attend immediately. Kim dressed quickly and met Dr. Park So-jin and Captain Lee Dong-woo in the corridor outside their quarters. All three looked tired but alert. "What's the emergency?" Lee asked as they hurried toward the chambers. "Colony ship New Bison has gone missing," Kim replied, reading from his device as they walked. 50,000 colonists on board. Last known position was in neutral space near the Vega sector. Dr. Park's face went pale. 50,000 people. That's one of our biggest colony ships. 12,000 children, Kim added quietly, reading more details from the report. The ship was carrying families to establish a new agricultural colony. They reached the council chambers to find them already filling with representatives from various species. The emergency lighting gave everything a harsh, clinical look that matched Kim's growing sense of dread. High Arbiter Quindle took his position at the center podium. His usually calm demeanor showed signs of straying. "The emergency session is called to order," Quindle announced. "We have received a distress call from the human colony ship New Bison. The vessel appears to be in distress in neutral space. The human delegation has requested immediate search and rescue assistance." Kim stood up. For the first time in months, he didn't wait to be formally recognized before speaking. "The New Bison sent its last transmission 6 hours ago," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "They reported engine problems and possible hostile contact. We have 47 member species with ships capable of reaching their last known position within 12 hours. We need immediate search and rescue operations." Counselor Vexstar was among the first to respond. The hegemony understands the human delegation's concern. However, operations in neutral space require careful consideration of jurisdictional boundaries. Kim felt something cold form in his chest. Jurisdictional boundaries? We're talking about 50,000 civilians in distress. "Precisely why we must be careful," said the bird-like counselor Kim had argued with before. "Rushing into neutral space without proper authorization could create diplomatic incidents with non-council species." Dr. Park activated her datapad and projected the New Bison's last known position. The ship is in open space, at least 2 light years from any claimed territory. There are no jurisdictional issues. Another counselor spoke up. "Nevertheless, proper procedures must be followed. We cannot simply dispatch rescue fleets without committee approval." Kim stared at the speaker. "Committee approval? For a rescue operation?" High Arbiter Quindle nodded gravely. "The Council has established procedures for operations in neutral space. All member species agreed to these procedures when they joined. How long do these procedures take?" Captain Lee asked, speaking for the first time. "A standard committee. Review requires 72 hours minimum," Quindle replied. "Complex cases may require additional time for thorough analysis." 72 hours? Kim's voice rose slightly. "The ship's life support systems have a maximum duration of 48 hours with that many people on board." Vexstar leaned back in his massive chair. Perhaps the human delegation should have considered these limitations before sending colony ships through dangerous areas. The words hit Kim like a physical blow. He looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of representatives from 46 other species. Most looked uncomfortable, but none were volunteering to help. Are you saying the Council will not help save 50,000 human lives because of paperwork? Kim asked. We are saying that proper procedures exist for good reasons, Vextar replied. Newer species often fail to appreciate the complexity of interstellar operations. Sometimes poor planning has unfortunate consequences. Dr. Park's datapad chimed with an incoming message. She looked at the screen, and her face went completely white. Kim noticed her expression immediately. What is it? Park looked up at him, with eyes that seemed to have aged years in seconds. The new Bison's distress beacon just went silent. The chamber fell completely quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the air recyclers. Kim stood very still for a long moment. He was processing what he had just heard, what it meant, and what the Council's response had been. 50,000 people, 12,000 children, and the Council was talking about committee reviews and proper procedures. I see, Kim said quietly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his datapad. He closed it with deliberate care, making sure the clasps were properly secured. Then he adjusted his tie, smoothing it down with precise movements. He brushed an invisible piece of lint from his jacket sleeve. The small, methodical actions seemed strange in the context of the emergency, but Kim continued them with focused attention. He was preparing himself for something. Dr. Park watched him with growing alarm. She had worked with Kim for over a year, and she had never seen him perform these particular grooming behaviors. Captain Lee was also staring at the ambassador, his military instincts telling him that something significant was happening. Kim straightened his jacket one final time. When he looked up at the Council, his eyes had changed. The diplomatic warmth was completely gone. In its place was something cold and calculating. In that case, Kim said, his voice dropping to a tone that somehow carried more authority than his previous diplomatic speaking voice. This diplomatic mission is concluded. Vextar looked confused. What do you mean, concluded? Kim didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from each species. When he spoke again, his words were delivered with clinical precision. For 18 months, the human delegation has attempted to work within Council frameworks. We have followed every procedure, respected every tradition, and accepted every slight with diplomatic grace. He paused, letting his words sink in. We have observed systematic discrimination against human interests. We have documented deliberate sabotage of human expansion rights. We have recorded coordinated efforts to isolate humanity from galactic commerce. Dr. Park realized what was happening. Kim wasn't speaking as a diplomat anymore. He was presenting evidence, like a prosecutor, building a case. And now, Kim continued, we have witnessed negligent disregard for human lives based on bureaucratic convenience. High Arbiter Quindle leaned forward. Ambassador, I understand you're upset, but I am not upset, Kim interrupted, his voice remaining completely level. I am informed. Dr. Park, please show the Council what we've learned about their coordination efforts. Park's hands moved across her datapad with practiced efficiency. The holographic display above them filled with communication intercepts, vote tracking data, and timeline analyses. For the past 6 months, we have been monitoring 17 different species communications regarding human issues, Park said, her voice matching Kim's new clinical tone. The evidence shows systematic coordination to exclude humans from Council benefits. The display showed message logs, meeting schedules, and voting patterns that painted a clear picture of organized discrimination. Captain Lee stood up beside his colleagues. His diplomatic demeanor had also vanished, replaced by the bearing of a military officer assessing a threat. While you've been playing political games, Lee said, we've been learning about each of your civilizations, military capabilities, resource dependencies, territorial vulnerabilities. Vexstar's expression shifted from confusion to concern. What are you implying? Kim adjusted his cuffs one more time. The gesture was becoming a ritual, marking his transformation from diplomat to something else entirely. We are implying nothing. Kim said, we are stating facts. The diplomatic phase of human council relations is over. What happens next depends on whether you prefer to renegotiate as equals or discover what humanity looks like when we stop being polite. The silence in the chamber was complete. Even the air recyclers seemed to have gone quiet. Dr. Park closed her datapad with a soft click. Captain Lee clasped his hands behind his back in a military rest position. Ambassador Kim straightened his tie one final time. The three humans stood together, no longer trying to look friendly or accommodating. They looked like what they had been all along, but had been hiding behind diplomatic masks. They looked dangerous. The transformation was complete, and everyone in the council chambers could feel it. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho stood with perfect posture, but everything about his presence had changed. The polite diplomat was gone. In his place stood someone who looked like he could dismantle civilizations with the same calm precision he used to adjust his tie. Since the council has chosen to prioritize bureaucracy over human lives, Kim said, his voice carrying a new edge, we will now discuss the actual situation. Dr. Park Sojin stepped forward and activated her datapad. The holographic display above them shifted to show detailed star maps of council space. While serving as your diplomatic partners, we have been conducting comprehensive intelligence operations throughout council territories, Park announced. Did you think we weren't watching? Did you think we weren't learning? The first display showed shipping routes through hegemony space. Every major supply line, every critical junction, every potential choke point was marked with precise detail. Counselor Vexstar, Park said, looking directly at the massive alien. 63% of your food shipments pass through the Altair Junction. Your military bases in the outer sectors depend entirely on supply runs that cross through 4 different systems, all of which have significant defensive vulnerabilities. Vexstar's small eyes widened. How do you... We explored those empty sectors you assigned us. Captain Lee Dong-woo interrupted. Turns out they weren't as empty as you claimed. They were perfect observation posts for monitoring your operations. The display changed to show the bird-like consular's territory. Critical infrastructure, military installations, resource extraction sites, all mapped with military precision. The Talvoran Empire relies on automated mining platforms in 17 different systems, Park continued. Platforms that are defended by exactly 42 security drones each. Drones with a known vulnerability to electromagnetic pulse weapons. The bird-like counselor made a strangled sound. High Arbiter Kundal stood up slowly. This is ... highly irregular. Intelligence gathering operations require council approval. From whom? Kim asked, his tone cutting through the Arbiter's protest like a blade. The same council that denied us exploration rights to systems you had already given to other species? The same council that just refused to save 50,000 human civilians? The holographic display shifted again. This time it showed detailed analyses of every council member species. Population centers, military capabilities, economic dependencies, political structures. Every species in this chamber, Park said, her voice now matching Kim's clinical tone, has critical vulnerabilities that we have identified and documented. Every single one. Captain Lee stepped forward. While you were dismissing us as inexperienced newcomers, we were mapping your territories, analyzing your defenses, and cataloging your weaknesses. This is unacceptable. Vexstar bellowed, rising from his chair. The Council will not tolerate espionage operations. The Council will tolerate whatever we decide it will tolerate, Kim said quietly, The simple statement carried so much authority that Vextar actually took a step backward. Kim continued speaking in the same calm tone. Every human colony has mandatory military service. Every human ship carries defensive systems that you dismissed as primitive. Every human citizen receives crisis response training that most of your species reserve for military specialists. Park added more displays to the hologram. Our agricultural colonies are all capable of converting to military production within 36 hours. Our exploration ships are designed to double as reconnaissance vessels. Our trade vessels can be modified for combat operations using standard equipment. You wanted to know what humans do when we explore empty space? Lee asked. We learn. We watch. We prepare for every possible scenario. The council chamber had gone completely silent except for the sound of various species, breathing in different atmospheric mixes. High Arbiter Quindle's voice was shaky when he spoke. Are you ... Are you declaring war on the council? Kim looked at him with something that might have been pity. War is what you declare against enemies, Kim said. We are offering you the opportunity to establish a proper business relationship between equals. The alternative is educational. What do you mean by educational? The bird-like counselor asked. Dr. Park smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a friendly expression. We mean that you will learn what it costs to treat humans as expendable, she said, starting immediately. The holographic display changed to show real-time shipping data. All human-controlled trade. Routes are now close to council species. 40% of your medical supplies move through our networks. 60% of your rare earth elements come from systems where we have established supply chain partnerships. You can't simply cut off trade agreements, Vextar started. We just did, Captain Lee said. Those agreements were made with a human delegation that was operating under diplomatic protocols. That delegation no longer exists. Kim gestured toward the display. Our exploration fleets are already moving to secure the systems that were fraudulently assigned to other species. We tried to file proper claims through council procedures. Those procedures failed us. So we're taking them anyway, Park added. The implications hit the council members like a wave. Several representatives started talking at once, but Kim raised one hand, and somehow the gesture commanded immediate silence. The colony ship New Bizen was never missing, Kim said quietly. The statement hung in the air like a physical thing. The distress call was a test. We wanted to see how the council would respond to human lives in immediate danger. Kim's expression didn't change. Your response was noted. Vextar's face showed confusion and growing anger. You mean, we conducted a military exercise to evaluate council reliability in crisis situations, Kim said. The exercise is complete. You failed. Dr. Park closed her datapad with a decisive snap. The New Bizen is currently establishing our new forward base in the Kepler 442 system, a system that was officially assigned to the hegemony, but which has been claimed through right of occupation. Right of occupation is not recognized by council law. High Arbiter Quindle protested. Captain Lee smiled, and it was even less friendly than Park's had been. Council law applies to council members operating under diplomatic immunity, Lee said. We are no longer operating under diplomatic immunity. Kim straightened his jacket one final time. We are now operating under human law. Human law recognizes a right of occupation for systems abandoned by their claimants. Since the hegemony never actually established any presence in Kepler 442, we consider it abandoned. This is impossible, Vextar said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The council will not accept. The council will accept whatever we tell them to accept, Kim interrupted. Because the council needs us more than we need the council. The holographic display showed the economic data to prove his point. Human trade networks, resource supplies, and strategic positions were integrated into Council operations far more deeply than anyone had realized. "We came to you seeking cooperation," Park said. "We offered partnership, shared resources, and mutual benefit. You responded with discrimination, sabotage, and ultimately abandonment. So cooperation is no longer on the table," Lee added. Kim walked slowly toward the center of the chamber. His movements were precise and controlled, like a predator who knew exactly where his prey was located. "Here are your options," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. "You can renegotiate all agreements with full human equality and mutual respect. Or you can discover what humanity looks like when we stop pretending to be harmless." He paused in the exact center of the chamber, the same spot where High Arbiter Quindle usually stood to address the Council. "Choose quickly," Kim said. "Our patience for diplomatic solutions has been exhausted." The Council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from 46 different species began talking, shouting, and making various alien sounds of distress all at once. The noise was overwhelming, but Ambassador Kim Tae-ho stood in the center of it all with perfect calm. High Arbiter Quindle repeatedly struck his ceremonial gavel, trying to restore order. "The Council will come to order. This session will follow proper procedures." Kim looked up at the ancient alien with something approaching amusement. "Arbiter, there will be no discussion. We are informing you of new realities, not negotiating with you about them." The simple statement somehow cut through the noise. The chamber began to quiet as representatives realized that the humans were not asking for permission. Dr. Park So-jin activated her datapad one more time. The holographic display showed shipping schedules and supply chain data in real time. At 0800 station time, all human trade agreements were suspended, Park announced. Supply contracts worth approximately 2.4 trillion Council credits have been terminated immediately. Councillor Vextar had gone from confused to angry to something approaching panic. "You cannot simply terminate established contracts. There are legal procedures established by a council that considers human lives expendable." Captain Lee Dong-woo replied, "We no longer recognize the authority of this council to govern human actions." The bird-like counselor from the Talvoran Empire spoke up. "This is madness. You're 3 people representing 1 species. You cannot dictate terms to the entire council." Kim smiled, and the expression was colder than the space between stars. "Watch us," he said quietly. Dr. Park's display showed new data. Fleet movements, system positions, and military deployments across human space. "Our exploration fleets reached their new positions 6 hours ago," Park said. 17 star systems that were fraudulently assigned to other species are now under human control. "That's impossible," Vextar protested. "Our monitoring stations would have detected large fleet movements." "What monitoring stations?" "Captain," Lee asked innocently. The implications hit Vextar like a physical blow. His massive frame seemed to shrink as he realized what the humans were telling him. "You see, Counselor," Kim said, his voice carrying mock sympathy, "your monitoring stations were all conveniently located in systems that you thought were empty. Systems that you assigned to humans for exploration. Systems where we've been operating freely for months." Park added more detail to the holographic display. 43 monitoring stations, 67 automated defense platforms, and 91 supply depots, all disabled or repurposed over the past 6 months. "While you were laughing at human inexperience," Lee said, "we were systematically removing your ability to watch what we were doing." Several smaller species representatives began requesting permission to speak, but Kim waved them off. "If any species wishes to establish individual agreements with humanity, they may contact our diplomatic corps directly," Kim said. We are no longer conducting business through council intermediaries. High Arbiter Quindle leaned forward desperately. Ambassador, surely we can resolve this through proper channels. The council is willing to review the previous decisions. The council had its chance to make proper decisions. Kim interrupted. That chance ended when you chose bureaucracy over human lives. The holographic display shifted to show population and resource data for every council species. For your education, Park said, here's what happens next. The hegemony will experience food shortages within 2 weeks due to disrupted supply chains. The Talvoran Empire will face rare earth element shortages that will shut down their manufacturing centers within a month. She highlighted different sections of the data as she spoke. The Quindle Collective will lose access to medical isotopes that their population requires for basic health care. 12 other species will find their energy production systems failing due to lack of fusion catalyst materials. All materials that flow through human-controlled trade networks. Lee added. Vextar's voice was barely above a whisper. This will affect billions of civilians. Kim nodded slowly. Yes, it will. Just like your decision to abandon 50,000 human civilians would have affected them. The difference is that our civilians are alive and safe, while yours are about to learn the cost of your poor leadership. This is economic warfare, the bird-like counselor protested. This is business, Kim corrected. If you want access to human-controlled resources, you negotiate fair terms with humanity. If you prefer to maintain your superior attitudes, you find alternative suppliers. Dr. Park closed her data pad and looked around the chamber. Several species have already contacted us privately. It seems that when faced with immediate consequences, political posturing becomes less attractive. Captain Lee stepped forward. The Arcturian Federation, the Centauri Republic, and the Vegan Trade Collective have all expressed interest in direct bilateral agreements with humanity. High Arbiter Quindle looked shocked. Those species cannot negotiate outside of council frameworks. It violates fundamental agreements. Only if both parties recognize council authority, Kim said. Humanity no longer recognizes council authority over human affairs. The chamber fell silent again as the full implications became clear. The humans weren't just leaving the council, they were creating an alternative power structure. This is exactly what we warned against, Vextar said, his voice carrying desperation. Now, instead of arrogance, newer species lack the wisdom to handle this kind of responsibility. Kim walked slowly back toward the human section of the chamber. Dr. Park and Captain Lee fell into step beside him. You're absolutely right, Kim said without turning around. We do lack the wisdom to accept systematic discrimination with diplomatic smiles. We lack the maturity to prioritize bureaucracy over civilian lives. We lack the experience to know our place in a hierarchy that considers us expendable. He paused at their seats and turned back to face the council one last time. Fortunately, we have other qualities that make up for those deficiencies, Kim said. We learn quickly. We adapt efficiently. And we remember everything. Dr. Park gathered her materials with precise movements. The human delegation formally withdraws from council membership effective immediately. Further communications should be directed to the Human Colonial Authority. Captain Lay picked up his own data pad. Military attaches from interested species may contact the Human Defense Coordination Office to arrange security discussions. Kim straightened his tie one final time. The gesture had become his signature during this session, a small ritual. That marked each escalation in the confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, using the human phrase deliberately, thank you for the education. You have taught us exactly what we needed to know about galactic politics. The three humans walked toward the chamber exit with measured steps. Behind them, the chaos began again as representatives realized what had just happened. At the doorway, Kim paused and looked back at the council one more time. "Oh, and Counselor Vextar," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the noise. "The next time you want to give a species a lesson in knowing their place, you might want to make sure you're strong enough to enforce the lesson." Vextar's massive frame was trembling with rage, but he said nothing. Kim smiled pleasantly. "Because if you're not strong enough to enforce it, you end up learning the lesson yourself." The three humans walked out of the council chambers and into the corridor beyond. The doors sealed behind them with a soft hiss dot in the silence of the empty hallway. Dr. Park finally allowed herself a small smile. That went well. Captain Lai was already activating his communication device. "I need to contact Earth Command. They'll want to know that the diplomatic phase is officially over." Kim loosened his tie for the first time in months. "Send them simple message," he said. "Mission accomplished. The Council now understands our actual position." He paused, considering his words carefully. "Recommend upgrading all colonial defenses to military standard," Kim added. "The polite phase is over." As they walked toward their shuttle bay, alarms began sounding throughout the Council station. Emergency sessions were being called. Crisis committees were forming. Panic was spreading through the corridors as news of humanity's withdrawal spread. Behind them, 46 different species were learning what it meant to mistake restraint for weakness. Ahead of them, a galaxy was about to discover what humans looked like when they stopped pretending to be harmless. The three humans boarded their shuttle and departed for human space, leaving behind a council that finally understood what they had lost. The age of polite humanity was over. The age of honest humanity had begun.